Yo, what is up, guys? It's Cone back here again today with another video. The New York Knicks, as of last night, are eliminated from the NBA playoffs in their first appearance in about 7 or 8 years from the Atlanta Hawks in a 4-1 series victory for Atlanta. Atlanta will now move on to face the Philadelphia 76ers, while the Knicks will head home after a very impressive and very expectation-exceeding season. I hope people don't forget how much these Knicks exceeded expectations because of losing to the Hawks in kind of quick fashion in the playoffs. I know it's not the result that the Knicks wanted. I know it's not what Knicks fans thought was going to happen when they went into the series, but this was a very successful season for New York. I personally had them, I've said this in a ton of videos, had the Knicks as the 14th seed in the Eastern Conference coming into this season. I didn't believe in them, and they completely proved me wrong. They proved a ton of experts wrong. They proved pretty much everybody wrong, and that goes from top to bottom between whether it's Julius Randle, who became an all-NBA most improved player guy, RJ Barrett, who showed his potential, Derrick Rose, who really stepped up when he came into this team around the trade deadline. You had Obi Toppin showing some flashes at the end of the season. You had Emmanuel Quickley exceeding all expectations, all these different guys showing up. Tom Thibodeau, a great first season as their head coach, getting this team to really buy into a defensive identity, really playing off of that and playing their way to the 4th seed, getting home court advantage in the Eastern Conference playoffs, in an Eastern Conference that was really competitive all season, especially when you think about those about like 4 to 7 spots. It was really competitive all year. And the Knicks pulling out that 4 seed is something that should be celebrated. It should be something that the Knicks and Knicks fans are all proud of. However, going into this offseason, they have a lot of tough decisions to make. I do think they have a bright future ahead of them. Like I said, a lot of those guys that I just talked about stepping up are super young, so I think there's a bright future ahead of the Knicks. But now they have a lot of decisions to make, and whether those include a Julius Randle contract extension, which we'll get into it in a second, how much he's worth, what free agents to make a decision on, because this Knicks team has a lot of cap space, and ultimately, what do you do with this roster going forward? Do you try and continue to play it slow? You're like, all right, we have young guys, we're going to keep going, or do you try and buy in all right now and say, okay, we were the 4 seed, we're going to add some guys and try and make a run in the playoffs? It's a tough decision to make, and I do think the best way to start talking about the Knicks here is talking about what we saw in the playoff series against the Hawks, why they were so outmatched, and what they need to do adding to this team if they do want to continue to get better in terms of trying to make a deeper run into the playoffs, get to that second round, get to the conference finals, and hopefully for them, at some point, make the finals. So, starting off with the playoff series, they were completely outmatched. To be honest, the Hawks were just the more talented team in this series. Trae Young was by far the best player in this series. As for the Knicks, Julius Randle really was not good. He had a really poor series, one of the most poor series I've seen from an all-NBA caliber guy in a long time. Given the Hawks were just completely focusing him down a lot of the time, forcing him to take really tough jump shots, mainly because this Knicks team really doesn't have many offensive options at all, and I think that's the biggest need for this team. Like I said, they were a very defensive-minded team. These Knicks hung their hat on the defensive end of the ball. They were the best defensive team in the entire NBA this season. They would lock you up. They'd get forced turnovers. They would get transition opportunities. And that's kind of the way that they played their offense. They would get defensive stops that then turned into offensive opportunities. The problem in this series was they would get those stops, but the Hawks locked them down so much defensively, and guys were just missing shots and stuff like that, that none of those stops turned into offensive opportunities, which really hindered the ability of the Knicks to score points. They hardly scored 100 points per game in this series. I don't even know if they did, and that's crazy in today's NBA. You don't see that. They were kind of like an old school, like 2004 Pistons type team where their goal was to hold you to 85 points while they scored 90 in this series. That was the only way they were going to beat the Hawks, and the Hawks just have far too much firepower for that to be a viable way to win a series against them. That's ultimately why I picked the Hawks going into this series. I just didn't think the Knicks had enough offense, and they didn't. Derrick Rose had some great games. Like I said, an incredible addition for them at the trade deadline or around that timeline. He was really good, and I think he's a guy that I could see them bringing back. I think he likes New York. I know he wanted to be traded to New York. This is his second stint here, and with the way he performed in the playoffs, I wouldn't be surprised if the Knicks gave him a decent amount of money to return and continue to be that scoring option for them. RJ Barrett showed a lot of potential as a scoring option throughout the regular season. Just in the playoffs, it didn't quite translate. And it was his first playoffs. I'm going to cut him some slack. He's 20 years old. It's not like this ruins his legacy or anything like that, or this proves for the rest of his career that he can't be a viable playoff option. I still think he can, and I think there's a lot of time for him to prove that with his contract on the books for another season and then a team option after that, which is something we also need to look at because, like I said, they need to bring in some scoring. I do think they also really need to bring in a playmaker, and Julius Randle was their best playmaker all season. Elfrid Payton is probably their other best playmaker on this roster, and he just wasn't playable in the playoffs or even the second half of the season, really. Just really never showed up, didn't play great defense, didn't even do playmaking very well, which is what he's supposed to be good at, so he's not going to come back. The Knicks need to take a look at, they need to get someone that can either score the ball or facilitate. Honestly, they need both of those things. So if I'm the Knicks, I'm looking at a good point guard that can facilitate for you and can score the ball, and I'm looking to try and bring in some like elite scoring option to put next to Julius Randle, hopefully an improved RJ Barrett next season, Derrick Rose if you decide to bring him back, that kind of thing. So when we look at their actual money that they have a ton. They have a lot of money. They have one of the highest, I think they have one of the most available spaces for players to come in the entire NBA. They have the most money available. Julius Randle is making $19.8 million for next season. RJ Barrett's making $8.6 million, $5 million for Obi Toppin, $5.8 for Kevin Knox, $1.8 million for Mitchell Robinson, and $2.2 million for Emmanuel Quickley. Those are the only contracts they have on the books. Their free agents include Derrick Rose, Frank Ntilikina, Alec Burks, Elfrid Payton, Reggie Bullock, Taj Gibson, and that's it. Those are all and maybe Norval Powell. He has unguaranteed money. That's a lot of salary space that's available. They have maybe 2 max slots if they kind of do some working around. They have a ton of money is basically the point here. So they can really do what they want to do. If they want to bring an elite scoring option, they can probably shell out the money to do that. If they want to bring in an elite facilitator, they also probably have the money to do that. The problem is the free agent market isn't very good this season. This is a bad season to have a ton of cap space. The big fish is Kawhi Leonard, and I guarantee the Knicks will go after him. I guarantee the Miami Heat will go after him. I'm sure the Clippers are going to try and bring him back. So there's going to be a lot of competition for him. The problem is I'm not sure Kawhi is going to leave LA. Obviously, that could change if the Clippers do end up losing this series to the Mavericks in either 6 or 7 games. I'm recording this the day after the Mavericks won Game 6, so I'm not quite sure what happens yet. If you're seeing this video after that series ends, if the Clippers lost, there is potential that Kawhi could leave if he wants to win like for the rest of his career, because if the Clippers prove that they can't win in even a first round series against the team that they sought out in the Dallas Mavericks, it's a very high potential that Kawhi might want to leave if he's looking to win more championships. If he wants to just stay in LA though, and he thinks that there is still an opportunity to win there, because there is, the Clippers are good, but I honestly would kind of be surprised if Kawhi left. It would be very interesting and definitely shake up basketball if he did, but for right now, I think he's probably going to stay, and so if he doesn't come to New York, then the options get even thinner. Chris Paul looks like he's probably going to opt out. There are some rumors coming out that he's going to try and opt out and secure a longer-term contract instead of taking his player option for about $40 million, and that he would fit perfectly on this Knicks team. Like I said, they need a scoring option and a facilitator, and Chris Paul brings both of those things. I do, however, I really think Chris Paul's going to stay in Phoenix. I think he likes it there. He wanted to be traded there. I'm actually wearing my Chris Paul shirt right now with the Suns looking to close out the Lakers in Game 6 tonight. But I think Chris Paul's looking to stay in Phoenix. I would be surprised if Phoenix let him go with how good they were this season, with how well he fit next to Devin Booker. It seems like they get along really well. And I think Chris Paul just really likes the team. He likes his teammates. He likes the fans. I would be surprised if Chris Paul left, especially for a Knicks team that really did not quite perform in the playoffs this season. Chris Paul is getting old, and I think he wants to win. He wants to get a championship, and I think right now Phoenix is the best option for him, so I'd be surprised if he left. There's another option off the board. So when we look at options, probably the best market for the Knicks is the restricted free agency market. Now, there are some good unrestricted free agents. We can talk about like a DeMar DeRozan, a Kyle Lowry, a Mike Conley. Kyle Lowry and Mike Conley specifically do provide that facilitation role, while DeMar DeRozan also provides facilitation, but maybe a bit more scoring, but he might be a bit more expensive. So there are some options there. All those guys are older, so this would mean that the Knicks were fully committing to trying to win now. The problem is, I don't know if Kyle Lowry or Mike Conley or DeMar DeRozan, any of those guys, really raise the ceiling on this Knicks team all that much. Where I personally think the most value lies for this Knicks team in free agency is restricted free agency. In particular, I'm looking at one guy. You could talk about a guy like John Collins, who I don't know how he really fits on this Knicks roster, but he's fun. It would be kind of hilarious because the Hawks just knocked them off of the playoffs. But if you want to try and find a way to fit him in there, you could try and throw him some money. He's a great player, great offensive threat, and the Hawks really haven't been super eager to pay him a lot of money. So if you're Knicks, maybe you could try and do something like that. I really don't know how much he fits. But ultimately, I think the player that best fits this Knicks team in free agency, both in terms of play style and in terms of timeline, where he's both young and can help you win now if that's what you want to do, is Lonzo Ball. If I'm the Knicks general manager, I'm throwing an absolute bag at Lonzo Ball to get him to come to the Knicks. He is a perfect fit. I mean, perfect. What were the issues we talked about with the Knicks in the playoffs? They needed another facilitator. That's Lonzo's MO. That's exactly what Lonzo does. He's a great facilitator. What else did they need? Solid scoring. Lonzo Ball proved on the Pelicans this season that he can be a great scorer, both off ball and on ball. He can do whatever you need him to do. If you need him to be a spot up shooter, he can do that. If you need him to drive to the basket, he can try and do that too. Lonzo has really improved his offensive game, and he's still growing. He's still super young. And additionally, what is the Knicks' biggest strength? Defense. And Lonzo Ball adds to that too. Imagine if the Knicks had a great guard defender against the Hawks, as well as a guy who could put some points up on the board. Trae Young destroyed them. If they had a guard defender like Lonzo Ball, maybe they could have stopped Trae Young a little bit. Trae Young is one of those great offensive players that you can never quite truly stop, but maybe they at least could have slowed him down. And if they slowed him down a little bit, that might have been enough to take a couple more games or win this series. Lonzo Ball could be huge for this team, and I think they really need to go out and get him. If I'm the New York Knicks, I am making sure that Lonzo Ball is in a Knick uniform and playing home games at Madison Square Garden next season. The Pelicans don't seem super eager to pay him that much money, so if you pay him a decent amount, maybe like a $17, $20 million contract, which might seem kind of crazy, but I think he's a really good player, and like I said, he fits this team perfectly. And if they have the money to go out and get him and maybe add like another one of those unrestricted guys we talked about, like maybe a DeRozan, this team gets a lot better. A lot better. So, if I'm the Knicks, I'm particularly looking at Lonzo Ball in this offseason. If he does sign with the Knicks, you heard it here first. But ultimately, all of that free agency aside, those are tough decisions. But one of the toughest decisions, if maybe not the toughest, is the Julius Randle contract extension. Julius Randle this season proved he's capable of being an all-NBA player at times. He was the most improved player in the league. Like we said, he is really good. I said that at the start of the video, but how much is he worth? He really didn't show up in the playoffs, and that was partially due to the fact that the Hawks really focused him down due to the lack of the Knicks scoring options. But also at the same time, he just really did not perform under that pressure, and so how much money are you willing to pay him right now? It was one playoff series. It should not completely throw away the money that he's going to make. The Knicks, I guarantee, don't want to get rid of him or anything like that, but it's something to be worried about. So if you're the Knicks and Julius Randle comes to your office when the contract extensions open up and says, I want a max contract. I want you to pay me $30 million plus a season. What do you say to that? Do you say, sure, okay, yeah, you proved it. You're an all-NBA guy. You put our team on your back this past season and you brought us to the 4 seed, which is very fair. Or do you say, you really didn't show up in the playoffs and we don't want to pay you that much. We'd be happy to pay you maybe 20, 25 million, probably more like 25 million, but 30 feels like a lot. I don't know. It's a decision you can make, and it's something I think there should be a debate on. I think that's something that a lot of people are going to be talking about in this offseason, and I think ultimately that is the biggest decision of this Knicks offseason, is do you extend Julius Randle? I think the answer is yes, but more importantly, how much do you pay him? How much do you offer him? And you got to be careful, because if you lowball him, he can very easily say, okay, fine, I'll just sign with someone else after the season, whatever. You don't want to score in a guy that looks like the best player you've had since like Carmelo Anthony. You don't want to scorn him. You want him to be on this team. He was the motor behind a 4-seeded team in, like I said, a very competitive Eastern Conference. But is he worth max money? It's a conversation to be had. So overall, that's my overview on the Knicks this offseason. I think Tom Thibodeau did a great job. I think he's obviously going to be back as their head coach. I don't think that's a question. I think this Knicks team, what they're looking for next season is to just build on this. I think they're looking to add some free agents and extend Julius Randle, get kind of a more set, like established core going forward. And then next season, they want to make the playoffs again, maybe try and make a second round run if they can. They want to see Julius Randle get better. And most importantly, they want to see growth from their young guys. Obi Toppin, RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, guys like that. They want to see those young guys step up and grow alongside the more established guys like a Julius Randle, like a potentially Derrick Rose if they decide to bring him back, as well as seeing a guy like Mitchell Robinson, who missed a lot of time this season with injury, try and stay healthy and maybe trying to establish himself as their center of the future. And if he can't stay healthy, maybe you try and look to a different center at some point. I don't know. Those are all things to consider for this Knicks team. But as I said to start this video, Knicks fans should be super happy about the way that this team is headed, the way that they played this season. I think there was nothing to do but be proud of this team this offseason. Shout out to the New York Knicks. They proved me wrong entirely. And I'm happy to say that. I love it when people prove me wrong because that means they did better than I thought they were going to. And it's cool to see people succeed. So with that being said, let me know what you think the Knicks should do this offseason. Which of those decisions do you like? Should they bring in Lonzo Ball? Should they give Julius Randle a max contract extension? And what do you foresee them doing next season? If I had to predict, I think they're going to be a playoff team again. And depending on the free agency signings, maybe they could make a second round run. But with probably a returning Boston that I think is going to get better, as well as the Miami Heat, I'm sure will stock up a little bit. It's going to be tough out there in the East, alongside a team like the Hawks, who are now in the second round. And of course, your established teams like the Sixers, Bucks, the Nets. It's going to be tough, but the Knicks are here for the challenge, and I'm excited to see if they can do it. So I appreciate you guys watching this video. I will see you guys later for more of these What's Next videos. Be on the lookout for one for the Wizards, Grizzlies, and if any of the series end tonight, you'll see one for, assuming that these series end tonight, you may potentially see one coming up soon for the Lakers, the Blazers, or if those series go to 7, you'll see those eventually. So I appreciate you guys watching this video. I will see you later. Real one, say it back.